As the mining season nears its final stretch, Parker Schnabel finds himself facing a crisis that could derail everything he has worked for. His once promising ground is running dry, and now, with only a few weeks left to reach his ambitious 8,000-ounce season goal, he is scrambling to find a solution. With multiple wash plants running, Parker has been able to keep the gold flowing, but one of his key operations is on the verge of shutting down. Roxanne, the wash plant processing dirt from the long cut, is almost out of pay material. And without another location to move it to, the plant will be forced to sit idle, something Parker cannot afford at this stage in the season. The pressure is mounting. Despite owning over 95,000 acres of claims, Parker is running out of viable pay dirt. The season has progressed into late fall, meaning any ground he has stripped is frozen solid and unsuitable for mining. With the long cut nearly finished, the crew is left with a daunting question: where does Roxanne go next? At the start of the season, Parker had high hopes for the long cut. It was a massive excavation that he believed would yield significant gold, and he committed a tremendous amount of resources to making it work. But what he didn't anticipate was just how difficult and expensive it would be to mine. Foreman Mitch Blaschke has been leading the effort for 5 grueling months, battling breakdowns, frozen pay, and inconsistent gold returns. Now, after stripping and sluicing countless yards of dirt, the cut is nearly depleted. The once promising site that Parker had poured so much into has become a major problem, one that could cost him thousands of ounces if he can't find new ground immediately. Mitch and Parker both know the reality of the situation. The long cut is done. There's no more gold-rich dirt left to mine, and they have no backup plan in place. With the crew still short of their season goal, Parker needs to act fast. But with the Yukon's harsh climate working against them, finding fresh pay dirt in time is easier said than done. With few options remaining, Parker has turned his attention to an unconventional and risky alternative: processing old tailings left behind by miners decades ago. Back in the 1980s and 1990s, gold miners in the region relied on primitive pushbox wash plants that were far less efficient than modern mining equipment. As a result, much of the gold in the dirt was never fully recovered. Parker is betting that some of these tailings still contain enough gold to be worth processing. But there's a major challenge: these tailings have been sitting untouched for decades and are now covered in dense vegetation. Before they can even begin testing, the crew needs to clear the land and remove trees that have grown over the old mine waste. Parker calls in Tyson, who arrives with a mini excavator to start clearing the area and collecting samples for testing. If the tailings contain enough gold, it could be the lifeline Parker needs to keep Roxanne running. But if they don't, he will have to find another solution, and fast. Testing the tailings, a high-stakes experiment. Parker knows that testing the tailings is critical. Before committing Roxanne to full-scale production, they need to determine whether the old material contains enough gold to make it worth their time. To be profitable, the tailings must yield at least 1 gram of gold per 3 yards of material. Anything less, and the costs of fuel, labor, and equipment would outweigh the returns. The crew sets up a small test operation, using a mini trommel to process small batches of dirt. They carefully monitor the gold recovery, panning out the concentrates to see what's left behind. With every pan, Parker watches anxiously, knowing that the results of this test could determine the fate of his entire operation. Finally, they pan the last sample. If the results are good, they'll have a shot at salvaging the season. But if the tailings don't contain enough gold, Parker will be forced to make a tough decision: either move Roxanne to a new, untested cut or accept the reality that he may not hit his 8,000-ounce goal. As Parker prepared to weigh the results, he was forced to get creative, using plastic shot glasses as makeshift measuring tools. The results are in, and they're not what Parker Schnabel had hoped for. His last-ditch effort to salvage the season by reprocessing old tailings has failed. The test results needed to show at least 1 gram of gold per yard to make the operation viable. Instead, after all the work, the final tally came in at just 0.76 grams, far below the break-even threshold. After factoring in labor, fuel, and operating costs, Parker and his crew barely made $50 in profit from the test. The outcome was disappointing, to say the least. Sitting in silence, Parker stared at the results, clearly frustrated. After a long pause, he muttered, "We could just stop losing." But he knew that wasn't an option. With only a few weeks left in the mining season, he had to find new ground fast. This latest failure comes at a time when Parker can't afford to slow down. His goal for the season is an ambitious 8,000 ounces of gold, and he's still thousands of ounces short. With time running out, every decision he makes from here on out is critical. This latest setback is just one in a season filled with challenges, risks, and costly decisions. Just 5 weeks ago, Parker took a massive gamble, spending $2.5 million on 2 new claims, Gold Run and Sulphur Creek. Dominion, his main mining site, was struggling, and he desperately needed fresh paid dirt to stay in the game. Sulphur Creek was a high-stakes bet. No one knew for sure how much gold had been left behind by the old miners who had worked the area decades ago. But Parker had no choice. With Dominion underperforming, he needed a backup plan. At first, it seemed like the gamble was paying off. His crew hit Sulphur Creek hard, and within 3 weeks, they had recovered over 570 ounces of gold, putting them well on their way to the 1,000-ounce target. The wash plant, Bob, ran smoothly with minimal breakdowns, and for the first time in weeks, it looked like Parker's season was turning around. But then, disaster struck. The thawed paid dirt ran out. With winter closing in, any remaining paid dirt at Sulphur Creek was frozen solid, forcing an early shutdown of the operation. That meant Parker had to find a new source of gold immediately. Meanwhile, back at Dominion, Foreman Mitch Blaschke was running the last of the paid dirt from the long cut. For 19 weeks, Parker's team had fought through a grueling battle to mine the long cut. They dealt with breakdowns, frozen ground, equipment failures, and inconsistent gold. The operation had cost millions of dollars and drained massive amounts of fuel. After 19 weeks of non-stop work, the 20-acre long cut was finally mined out. Mitch stood at the edge of the massive hole they had carved out, reflecting on the sheer amount of time, energy, and resources it had taken to reach this point. The directive from Parker had been simple: "I don't care what it takes, get it done." And they had. But now, the long cut was finished, and there was no new ground ready to go. With Sulphur Creek shut down and the long cut mined out, Parker was left with only one active wash plant, Bridge Cut. And that wasn't going to be enough to reach his goal. With nowhere else to go, Parker turned to an unconventional plan: reprocessing old tailings. The failure of the tailings test leaves Parker in a desperate situation. He now has just one active wash plant and no clear source of paid dirt. His 8,000-ounce target is still far out of reach, and winter is closing in fast. With only a few weeks left in the season, Parker must make a crucial decision: where does he go next? His options are limited. Most of his claims are either already mined out or frozen solid. The only solution is to find thawed, accessible ground somewhere, anywhere. The coming days will be a make-or-break moment for Parker and his crew. If he doesn't find a viable source of gold soon, his entire season and millions of dollars could be lost. One thing is certain: the next few weeks will decide the fate of Parker Schnabel's season. Will his risky gamble on old tailings pay off? Or is he out of options as the mining season nears its end? As Parker reflects on the season so far, he knows that mistakes have been made. Managing multiple wash plants, scheduling mining operations, and predicting gold yields have all been challenging. There were times when better planning could have saved them time and money. Now, with debts to pay and only a few weeks left in the season, he can't afford any more missteps.